as the moderator. Nirupama Dutt, are you here? Yes, there you are. Come on, please. And the very, very well-respected, very honorable Syeda Hameed. Can I please invite you on stage? She's an administrator, a writer, a translator, and a woman of substance. Is she here? You want to just escort her up? There she is. आइए. Come. नहीं नहीं आप बैठिए. नहीं सब नहीं जा रहे हैं, वो ऐसे ही होता है. It's like a wave. Yeah. Just see both mics are working. So we're going to start on this autobiography, a discussion. Nirupama, please take it forward.
Just 2 lines in Urdu to honor Syeda ji. गजल के मीठे लहजे में बोलूं, वो आ जाए तो फूलों में तोलूं. Syeda ji is one of the women who have led the country after independence in ways more than one. A writer, a member of the Planning Commission, fighting constantly for women's rights, and we owe much to her. And the occasion here is her autobiography, the book, which she has humbly titled A Drop in the Ocean. Syeda ji, I'd like to ask you, how did this name come to you for this book?
Thank you very much, Niru. And I'm very grateful for the people who are still have the stamina to stay behind. So the hall is emptied out, but I think you are the select people, and I love you for that. Why is the book called A Drop in the Ocean? There is a couplet of Ghalib. आप सब मिर्ज़ा गालिब को जानते हैं? There is a couplet of Ghalib which reads, Mandira, come and sit down. I like to see you up front. गालिब, मिर्ज़ा गालिब कहते हैं, थोड़ा हिंदी में भी बोल सकते हैं या नहीं, अंग्रेजी में बोलना है? अच्छा, मिर्ज़ा गालिब कहते हैं, इशरते कतरा है दरिया में फना हो जाना. A drop, it's the ecstasy of a drop to become one with the ocean. इशरते कतरा है दरिया में फना हो जाना और दर्द का हद से गुजरना है दवा हो जाना. आप हवा भी कर सकते हैं. ये जो है ना, जब when the pain reaches a climax, it becomes its own medicine. So I wanted to call this book Ishrate Qatra, but everyone is not as well informed as you are, so I was told nobody will understand. Therefore, it is A Drop in the Ocean. Yeah.
So it is Ghalib who inspired you to give this title. And, we've heard so much of politics, world politics. In the last session. What has poetry meant to you?
You know, poetry, if I tell you honestly, my heart, it was Khushwant Singh who stayed with me throughout my life. And we shared our love for poetry. I inherited poetry from my my father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather. In fact, my great-grandfather in 1874 wrote about the empowerment of women. In 1874. And he wrote, now listen to it, all the women in this audience should listen to this. He wrote, "Jab tak jiyo tum ilmo danish se raho mehroom ya." Till you are alive, you are not educated. Jab tak raho tum, 1874, jab tak raho tum ilmo danish se raho mehroom ya, जैसी हो आए बेखबर वैसी ही जाओ बेखबर. जो इल्म मर्दों के लिए समझा गया आबे हयात, ठहरा तुम्हारे हक में वो जहरे हलाहल सरबसर. It is poison for you, which was considered आबे हयात for the men. And then he says, आता है वक्त इंसाफ का, आता है वक्त इंसाफ का, नजदीक है यौमुल हिसाब. The day of judgment is close. आता है वक्त इंसाफ का, नजदीक है यौमुल हिसाब. मर्दों को देना होगा इन हक तलफियों का वहाँ जवाब.
बहुत अच्छा.
The men will have to answer for depriving you of rights. So I got my poetry from there, but you know, I was nurtured by Khushwant Singh. And today I'm here, despite, I'm not as old as Prem Shankar Jha, but despite my age, despite my disabilities, I'm here because of the love for Khushwant. So that's the sum total.
Would you share something, some memory of Khushwant Singh or some interaction on poetry?
I would really be very happy, Niru, and I'm so glad you asked me that question, because Khushwant ji has been he's really been my mentor. And I'll just read out, this is my book, A Drop in the Ocean, which was supposed to be called Ishrate Qatra, but it's not called that. Anyway, I'll just read a little portion of this to you. I was 9 years old when I met him for the first time. We had moved to Delhi in the 1950s and lived in Sujan Singh Park. The partition of India had left us children very bewildered. We had heard sounds of older family members crying softly at night. In 1947, their dear ones had crossed the border and gone to Pakistan. I used to wonder, what was this Pakistan which caused us to lose 90% of our family? And the grief, which was really, never really forgotten, was silently passed on to the next generation. I can close my eyes and conjure up the image of my standing before Khushwant, tongue-tied and fidgety. This was after my story, and the story was called You Have to Learn to Make Friends. मैं 9 साल की थी जब मैंने वो लिखी थी कहानी. It was after my story, You Have to Learn to Make Friends, had been published in Shankar's Weekly. Khushwant had written me a letter complimenting me on that story.
How lovely.
And my father insisted we go across his flat to thank him. It was the same room which I was to visit again and again over many, many years, 50 years and more. So throughout the time, my love of my life, my mentor, my teacher was Khushwant. And if I may just add one more thing about my connection with him. Those days are later on, I went to Canada for a long time, and then when I came back, I was a fellow in Teen Murti working on Maulana Abul Kalam Azad. Khushwant, I used to drop by to see Khushwant on my way to the library to discuss with him my chapters as they were being written. What emerged as the final outcome was my biography of Maulana Azad. Khushwant was as involved with the writing as I was. I had written a long chapter about Maulana Azad, the poet, the writer, the chronicler, which I derived from his collection of letters, which was called Ghubare-Khatir. Khushwant, with his passion for Urdu poetry, enjoyed that chapter the most. As recounted earlier, he recommended the book to Penguin India, but they didn't take it. I was hurt and Khushwant was annoyed. अब उसकी लंबी कहानी है, उसकी कहानी मैं नहीं सुनाऊंगी, but this was my second connection with Khushwant.
You've just spoken about partition and, you know, the pain that was inherited by the next generation. How do you remember your growing up years in the 40s and 50s?
Well, there is, again, I go back to poetry. May I go back to poetry?
Please do.
In my book, you know, there is a whole chapter on being Muslim, being Indian, being woman. And I was a Muslim, I was an Indian, and I was a woman. And I rose to, Khushwant ji used to say, अब तो इसको लाल बत्ती की गाड़ी मिल गई है. He loved my rising, but he told me continuously कि don't get taken up, ये सब temporary बातें हैं, अपना लिखना पढ़ना मत छोड़. So I had to keep writing, and when you know that, do you know that Khushwant ji translated Allama Iqbal's long poem, and he translated it in verse. He translated it in verse, and then I had to translate Maulana Altaf Hussain Hali's Musaddas, which was a very long poem. And Khushwant ji ने जो अल्लामा इकबाल की पोएम ट्रांसलेट की थी, उसका नाम था शिकवा जवाब शिकवा. और मैंने जो ट्रांसलेट की थी, मैंने कहा मैं कैसे, how can I translate it in verse? So he said, if I can do Shikwa Jawab Shikwa, you can do Hali. So that was a continuous dialogue with us. But when you talk about, you know, how the partition affected me, and being Muslim and being a woman and being an Indian, you know, I experienced my first communal setback when I was 9 years old. And I wrote this story, and I just want to briefly tell you about it, which is that I used to always feel very hesitant. ये सब किताब में लिखा हुआ है. I used to feel very hesitant. मुझसे नाम पूछता था तो मैं अपना नाम बम्बल करके बताती थी, क्योंकि मुझे पता था कि कुछ गड़बड़ ज़रूर है. So then finally I couldn't. Somebody asked me, अब तुम्हारा नाम क्या है? And this was in Sujan Singh Park. They're all children, and I had to say my name. And then they said, अच्छा इसका नाम तो हम इसके साथ नहीं खेलेंगे. So that was the first dhakka I got. But there were a lot of other things also happening. And that's where Khushwant, you know, came forward, and he said, you know, this is, and he gave me a lot of encouragement and so on. But having experienced that, then I went away for a long time to Canada, and I had my own life in Canada, which is again recounted in this book. But when I returned, I rose and rose and rose. And like Khushwant said, ki laal batti wali gaadi. So that meant that I became a minister of state. You know, planning commission members are ministers of state. So I became minister of state, and not only one term, I served 2 terms. But Khushwant kept telling me, don't get taken in by this, don't give up your... But, you know, the trauma remained. And after 2014, then the whole scenario changed. So then, of course, you know, Prem Shankar Jha and Manish, they gave you the whole story about it. But life just changed dramatically. And now, you know, my life is completely different. But I take him as a mentor and as somebody whose ideals I follow. And for Khushwant, religion was not, I mean, he dedicated a book to me. एक किताब थी उनकी, Need for a New Religion in India. and that somehow he dedicated it to me. And I wondered, why did he dedicate that book to me? And I realize now, because he realized where we were heading for. And that is why, the whole thing is exposed, explicated, and explained in this book.
And you talk of this, the polarization and getting hurt, yet achieving so much. What was the strength which led you forward, becoming a member of the Planning Commission, doing a lot for the likes of us who came later, giving us visibility? What was the strength which kept you going?
I used to think that when I became a member of the Women's Commission, I went to, Mohini Giri was the chair. And I went to when Mr. Gujral phoned me and said, I want you to become member of the National Commission for Women. I said, why? Why me? And then when I went in Mohini Giri, and by the way, Mohini is one other mentor of mine. So when I sat across Mohini Giri, she said, I said, what do I have to do? And she said, I'm not running a school. I'm not running a school for you. I'm not teaching you gender. And, and then, we became ek jaan aur do kale, matlab one life, and there were two entities. And then whenever we went to the remotest part of this country, in one room, I used to say my namaz, and Mohini used to do her Saraswati Vandana, and Padma Seth, who was the daughter of the first speaker of the Lok Sabha, a man called Ananta Sainam Iyengar. Padma ji used to do nothing. She was an agnostic, and that was also fine. Saraswati Vandana was also fine, and namaz was also fine. So in the remotest part of the country, we rushed like fire engines. Anytime and you have to make systemic changes. Magar dil nahi chahta tha ki agar there was a gang rape, or there was a sati, or there was a case of atrocity against women, we had to rush. So in that whole, it was 3 years of hectic. And then when it was Planning Commission time, then Dr. Manmohan Singh phoned me and said, will you be a member? And I said, my God, I'm not an economist. What can main kaise kar sakti hu? And then he said, no. And then not only one term, I served 2 terms. And it was the most, Niru, it was the most fulfilling time of my life, because planning is not done in Yojana Bhavan. Now, of course, it is Niti Bhavan or something. It is done on the gully and mohallas of this country. And believe me, it is the most fulfilling, the most soul-satisfying experience. And, it's all, I have unraveled my life for, my wonderful readers who will take the trouble to read it. And I just want to say one more thing to you, Niru, if I may. Sorry. मैं एक बार मैं ये कहना चाह रही हूँ कि again back to Khushwant. I can't get over him. I close my eyes. ये end में खुशवंत जी के बारे में मेरा एक chapter है, उसका अंत मैं बता रही हूँ. I close my eyes and there he is, sitting on his comfortably worn-out chair with his old mudha as his footstool, a blanket thrown across his legs during winters, with the fire glowing merrily. In summer, he is in the same chair, clad in a blue kurta, white crumpled shalwar, a yellow band around his head in lieu of a turban. He is lifting the phone, pouring a drink, and scribbling endlessly. I think of Faiz Ahmad Faiz, who must have had him in mind when he wrote. And I'm going to recite Faiz to you and I'm going to translate it. आप समझ तो जाएंगे पर फिर भी मेरा तर्जुमा सुन लीजिए. हम परवरिशे लौह कलम करते रहेंगे. हम परवरिशे लौह कलम करते रहेंगे. जो दिल पे गुजरती है रकम करते रहेंगे. मैं खाना सलामत है तो हम सुर्खिये मैं से तज़ीने दरो बाम हरम करते रहेंगे. The pen, इसका मतलब है, and this is my translation, the pen and slate we will nurture and drive. What touches the heart we'll always inscribe. May the tavern prosper with its shimmering wine. We will color and embellish the Kaaba sublime. Given his love for Urdu poetry, a love which we shared, if I had to express our friendship in one couplet of the thousands we have read separately and together, I would again pick this one up from Faiz Ahmad Faiz. And this is the last thing, this is the end of the chapter, not the chapter, but a portion of the chapter on Khushwant. And the couplet from Faiz Ahmad Faiz is, कभी कभी याद में उभरते हैं नक्शे माजी मिटे मिटे से. कभी कभी याद में उभरते हैं नक्शे माजी मिटे मिटे से. वो आजमाइश दिलो नजर की, वो कुर्बतें सी, वो फासले से. Sometimes on memory's lane, sometimes on memory's slate appear markings of a past faint and dim. Those challenges of love and desire, that closeness, those distances. कभी कभी याद में उभरते हैं नक्शे माजी मिटे मिटे से. वो आजमाइश दिलो नजर की, वो कुर्बतें सी, वो फासले से. This is my last couplet for Khushwant. And then he always said, his philosophy of life is कि रो में है रक्श उम्र, कहाँ देखिए थमे. And this applies to all of us. The galloping steed of life is galloping away like a horse. रो में है रक्श उम्र, कहाँ देखिए थमे. ना हाथ बाग पर है, ना पा है रकाब में. ना तो आपके हाथ में उसकी रकाब है, ना तो आपके पाँव में उसकी स्टिरअप है. The steed of life keeps moving, 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 and you have no control over it. This was Khushwant's रो में है रक्श उम्र, कहाँ देखिए समय, कहाँ देखिए थमे. ना हाथ बाग पर है, ना पा है रकाब में. Neither is the hand and the lagam, nor is the foot in the stirrup. The steed of life keep moving. Isn't that true of all our lives? The steed keeps moving and moving and moving. So I had to say this because I'm so emotional about it.
No, it's very beautifully said.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
I have been witness to Dastan going by Syeda Sahib. And she has inherited the Ganga Jamuna Tehzeeb. What kind of a culture was that? And the pain of losing it.
That's such a good question, Niru, and only someone like you could have asked it. Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb mein, when we were children, we have something called Muharram. जो आप सब जानते हैं, मुहर्रम में it's the shahadat of Imam Hussain. People like Jagannath Azad, people like Gopinath Aman, people like Gopi Chand Narang, people like Jyoti Sarup Pandey, they all recited. People like Vidya Rao, they all recited. I mean, they used to recite, they used to write. तो वो हमें फर्क ही नहीं पड़ता. I didn't even know. I knew कि for example, for example, somebody like Firak Gorakhpuri, right? Everyone knows the name Firak Gorakhpuri. I didn't know that he was Raghupati Sahai Firak Gorakhpuri. हमें पता ही नहीं था. कोई मसला ही नहीं था कि कौन, who is a Hindu, who is a Muslim, who is a Sardar. The best, Kunwar Mahinder Singh Bedi has written the best poetry about the Prophet, about Hussain, about Muharram. Kunwar Mahinder Singh Bedi was tops. So we really did not even, that Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb. And recently, Niru, I'm working on a book which is, I think, more or less one draft is done, in which Hindu poets, Sikh poets have written about the the Prophet, Islam, all the Imams and Muslim poets have written about all the avatars, all the Bhagwans, all the festivals, everything, Hinduism and Sikhism, with equal devotion. So, I mean, this is just an amazing things. वो गंगा जमनी तहजीब जो हमारी थी, वो हमारी अगर ख़त्म हो गई और अगर हम एक तरह से we become एक यूनिफॉर्म बन गए ना, हम एक रंग के बन गए, तो हमारी सब रंगा रंगी सब खत्म हो जाएगी. And Khushwant always predicted, he said, agar ye ho gaya, then you're going to lose everything. And I could quote a lot from there, but that's really, we need to, wo culture, wo civilization, we have to hang on to it. We have to, with a vengeance, hang on to it, with a determination. हमें उसको बरकरार रखना है, हमें उसको खोना नहीं है. And this is the message that this Khushwant Literary Festival has to give us. You know, there is Zaban bhi sundar hai, iska combination bhi sundar hai. Without that combination, without that Ganga Jamni, हमारी जिंदगी बिल्कुल बेरंग हो जाएगी.
You know, in the past years, we have seen deliberate attempts made to break it, to, you know, spread hatred. And yet, people have shown some kind of a resilience. What do you feel about that?
I'm just, आपने मुझे लग रहा था कि आप शायद ये सवाल करें, तो मैंने उस पे फ्लैग कर दिया था. This is एक पोएम है जो कि किसने लिखी है? देवी प्रसाद मिश्रा ने लिखी है. देवी प्रसाद मिश्रा ने लिखी है ये पोएम. और ये पोएम जो है ये अब आप सुनिए, ये मिक्स ज़बान है, इसमें मुसलमानों के बारे में है. और क्या कहते हैं वो देवी प्रसाद मिश्रा? प्रतापगढ़ के हैं, यूपी के प्रतापगढ़ के हैं. और उन्होंने क्या लिखा? वो फारस से आए, वो तुरान से आए, समरकंद, फरजाना और सिस्तान से आए. वो बहुत दूर से आए, फिर भी पृथ्वी के कुछ हिस्सों से आए. वो आए थे क्योंकि वो आ सकते थे. वो आए थे क्योंकि वो आ सकते थे. वो मुसलमान थे. या खुदा, उनकी शक्लें आदमियों से मिलती जुलती थीं. या खुदा, उनकी शक्लें आदमियों से मिलती जुलती थीं. वो ना होते तो लखनऊ ना होता. आधा वो ना होते तो लखनऊ ना होता. आधा इलाहाबाद ना होता. मेहराबें ना होती. गुंबद ना होता. अदब ना होता, लिटरेचर. मीर, मखदूम, मोमिन न होते. मीर तकी मीर, मखदूम और मोमिन खां मोमिन. मीर, मखदूम, मोमिन न होते, शबाना न होती. वो न होते तो उपमहाद्वीप के संगीत को सुनाने वाला खुसरो न होता. वो न होते तो उपमहाद्वीप के संगीत को सुनाने वाला खुसरो न होता. वो न होते तो पूरे देश के को गुस्से से बेचैन करने वाला कबीर न होता. वो न होते तो पूरे देश के गुस्से से बेचैन होने वाला कबीर न होता. वो न होते तो भारतीय उपमहाद्वीप का ये दुख को कहने वाला. नाउ लिसन टू दिस, आप इसको सुनिए गौर से. वो न होते तो पूरे देश के गुस्से से बेचैन होने वाला कबीर न होता. वो न होते तो भारतीय उपमहाद्वीप का दुख को कहने वाला गालिब न होता. वो मुसलमान थे, लेकिन दमास्कस, लेकिन दमिश्क उनका शहर नहीं था. द कंट्री वॉज नॉट दमास्कस. वो मुसलमान थे, लेकिन दमास्कस उनका शहर नहीं था. वो मुसलमान थे, मगर अरब का पेट्रोल उनका नहीं था.
बहुत अच्छे.
वो दजले का नहीं, यमुना का पानी पीते थे। वो दजले का नहीं, यमुना का पानी पीते थे। ये है देवी प्रसाद मिश्रा प्रतापगढ़ से, और उसका टाइटल है वो मुसलमान थे। तो ये है हमारी गंगा जमनी तहजीब, और ये हमारे ही शायर हैं जो हमारे ही दुख दर्द को बयान कर रहे हैं। इसलिए नो मैटर व्हाट हैज हैपेंड सिंस 2014 टू 2024, जिस गम से, जिस दुख से, जिन हालात से हम गुजरे हैं, मगर देवी प्रसाद मिश्रा तो हैं, जगन्नाथ आजाद तो हैं, गोपीनाथ अमन तो हैं, गोपीचंद नारंग तो हैं, कुंवर महेंद्र सिंह बेदी सहर तो हैं, इसीलिए हम जिंदा हैं। बस करें।
एक थोड़ा सा और पूछना। अभी आप बात कर रहे थे कि भी फिराक गोरखपुरी का नाम हमने सोचने की कभी जरूरत भी नहीं की और ज़रूरत भी नहीं समझी। तो मेरे हाथ इन दिनों एक किताब लगी जो एक स्कॉलर हैं हरियाणा की, उन्होंने छापी है 1922, जब क्विट इंडिया मूवमेंट थी, बंदी शायरों के मुशायरे, कि जो शायर थे उनको आगरा जेल में बंद किया हुआ था, तो वहाँ वो प्रोटेस्ट के बाकायदा मुशायरे करते थे। तो वो सारा लिटरेचर प्रोस्क्राइब हो गया था और उसे भेज दिया गया था लंदन, और इन लोगों को लखनऊ ट्रांसफ़र कर दिया, जहाँ देवर इन सेपरेट सेल्स, और मुशायरे होने बंद हो गए। बट एक बात उन्होंने नहीं की, अंग्रेज़ों ने भी नहीं की, उन्होंने उनको जलाया नहीं। तो वो सब कविताएं आप रिसर्च कॉलेज जाकर देख सकते। तो इस तरह का जो एक था रिश्ता, क्या उस रिश्ते को तोड़ना मुमकिन है?
नहीं, जैसे यू नो वी हैव, मेरी एक चैप्टर है इसमें, दूरियां नज़दीकियां, एंड इट्स ऑल अबाउट इंडिया पाकिस्तान रिलेशंस। इंडिया पाकिस्तान रिलेशन में जो हमारे सबसे बड़े सरबराह थे वो थे कुलदीप नैयर, हमारे एक निखिल चक्रवर्ती थे, हमारे एक जस्टिस राजेंद्र सच्चर थे। ये हमारे सरबराह थे, और वो दूरियां नज़दीकियां, और हमारे अब भी 2024 में आज भी 150 people came on this side of the Wagah border and 150 people Pakistanis came on that side of the Wagah border शमा जलाने के लिए। वो यहाँ शमा जलाई, उन्होंने वहाँ शमा जलाई, but they were not allowed to come to the border. So this sentiment, ये जो है ना, people to people, this people to people was started in 1994 or even earlier than that by a woman called Asma Jahangir, who started this movement, and lot of men and people like I.A. Rahman and Dr. Mubashir Hassan and many people, they joined that whole the cavalcade, और यहाँ से कुलदीप नैयर और जस्टिस राजेंद्र सच्चर और निखिल चक्रवर्ती के लीडरशिप में हम लोग सब गए बॉर्डर पे। सो देयर इज सो मच गुड फीलिंग बिटवीन पीपल टू पीपल। तो ये दूरियां नज़दीकियां जो हैं, और हमने अगेन आई हैव रिटन अबाउट इट, विमेन्स इनिशिएटिव फॉर पीस इन साउथ एशिया। औरतों ने एक, जब करगिल की लड़ाई चल रही थी, उस वक्त 34 women got into a bus led by Mohini Giri and Nirmala Deshpande. I was also one of them. And we went across the border, across the Wagah border, and reached on the other side. And then after 2 months, 2 buses of 78 Pakistani women came from that side, led by Asma Jahangir. And when she, जब वो वहाँ आई, बस अपनी सदाए सरहद उनकी बस थी, जब when they reached Delhi, then बस से उतर के उन्होंने फाख्ताएं, 2 pigeons were let into the air, like and at that time Mr. Gujral invited them. as a delegation of Pakistani women, and then when our delegation went there, Parvez Musharraf invited them in Islamabad. तो ये बातें हैं, historical चीजें हैं, they are historical truths. इतनी नजदीकियां हैं और इतनी दूरियां create करते हैं. Now, even today, Asma Jahangir has gone, she has passed away, Madiha Gohar has passed away. वो आती थी अमृतसर में with all the Punjabi theatre, she used to bring Madiha Gohar's Ajoka, उनका group था. So all of that is recorded here, and that is the sentiment that exists between these two countries. But what we have are these obdurate, these ये जो हमारे बीच में जो सलाखें हैं, हमारे बीच में जो खलीजे हैं, हमारे बीच में जो दीवारें हैं, वो किसी और की बनाई हुई हैं. It's not people to people. And I can tell you that even if somebody dies on that side, my brother passed away a couple of years ago, and I've recorded that. I could not even get a visa to go there. I could not even go for his funeral. And this is the kind of, the imposition of these strictures on us. मगर मुझे पता है दिल में सबके there is a sentiment, and we have to evoke that sentiment. And इसीलिए मैंने that chapter on दूरियां नजदीकियां. And two things I want to say to you, Niru. And one is I'm a Haryanvi by birth. My 800 years ago, and I've recorded that, my ancestors came to Panipat. 800 साल पहले वो पानीपत में आए. And and in 1947, by force, they were put into trucks and sent across to Pakistan. Only a few of us remained behind. The people who have followed Nehru and Mahatma Gandhi and Maulana Azad, but 97% of them went across. And that generation, जब वो मरने लगते थे, तो उनके दिल में सिर्फ एक, उनके होंठों पे एक बात होती थी, हमें एक मुट्ठी खाक की पानीपत से ला दो. That's all we need. So I'm saying the emotion and sentiment was so intense, and that I think what the question that you asked is if people to people, there is a sentiment, there's a feeling, there's a culture, there's a music, there's film, there's theater, so much likeness among people, but there is also this enormous strictures that have been imposed. वो नफरतें जो ज़हरे हलाहल जो भरा गया है, वो that is something we need to let it flow out of the younger generation. And the one last thing I'll say is, एक young लड़की हमारे साथ गई थी when we went to Pakistan at the time of Kargil in this women's bus of peace, and she said to General Musharraf, enough, and she was only about 15 or 16 years old. Musharraf was sitting there, and a small delegation of us went. सब तो जा नहीं सकते थे, थोड़ा से लोग गए थे. She said, don't pass on this hatred to the younger generation. We don't need this hatred. हमें नफरतें नहीं चाहिए. So that was like a symbolic thing. Yeah.
It brings tears to the eyes to hear all this. And I'm reminded of another, our Punjabi poet, Amrita Pritam.
Of course.
Whose ode to partition, whose sorrow, she called out to Waris Shah. Aj आखां Waris Shah nu कितों कब्रां विचों बोल, ते अज किताबे इश्क दा कोई अगला वर्का फूल. एक रोई सी धी पंजाब दी तू लिख लिख मारे वैन. अज लखां धीआं रोंदियां तैनू वारिस शाह नू कहन, उठ दर्दमंदा दिया दर्दिया उठ तक अपना पंजाब. अज बेले लाशां पटकदियां ते लहू दी परी चनाब. But sadly what happened, because those were still times of hatred, partition had happened just then, there were protests that why has Amrita Pritam addressed this poem to Waris Shah? And why not to one of the Sikh gurus? This poem had to be addressed to Waris Shah, who's as popular in this Punjab as he was there, loved by both. So in a way, what is the role? A very positive role has been played by writers, by authors, by painters, in connecting the two countries?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. I'll have a sip of water.
Please.
मुझे आपको एक कहानी सुनानी है, फिर उसके बाद आपकी तकलीफ खत्म. Niru said about, thanks, about Amrita Pritam. So we are a group which is Pakistan India People's Forum for Peace and Democracy, again led by people like Kuldeep and Justice Satchar and all. So we performed an event which was on Amrita Pritam and Fahmida Riaz. Wow. Fahmida Riaz was another, lover of, she was, I think, a Sindhi probably. She's also passed away now recently. So that was a very, the two poets were there, and then there was, of course, Pakistanis were very keen to come. Visa to sawal hi nahi paida hota. So that was something which was an extremely important event. It was held in Jawahar Bhavan. So एक तरफ फहमीदा रियाज और एक तरफ अमृता प्रीतम. और दूसरा सवाल क्या था आपका? Punjabi poets.
And what kind of a role has poetry played in, keeping the love alive?
देखिए, जहाँ तक पोइट्री का सवाल है, सबसे ज़्यादा जो कुंवर महेंद्र सिंह बेदी शहर का जो कलाम है, जो मुझे तो इतना इस वक्त याद नहीं आ रहा, मगर उनका इट्स सो स्टरिंग. और वो क्या सिर्फ मुस्लिम का मोहम्मद पे इजारा तो नहीं. मुस्लिम्स डोंट हैव अ राइट ऑन मोहम्मद. यानी उनका पहली लाइन, इश्क हो जाए किसी से कोई चारा तो नहीं, सिर्फ मुस्लिम का मोहम्मद पे इजारा तो नहीं. Muslims are not the only owners of Muhammad. We are equally the owner of Muhammad. This is Kunwar Mahinder Singh Bedi's Seher. He spoke these words, and itne shair guzre hain who are, who flow between these two cultures and the two religions. चाहे वो सिख हो, चाहे वो हिंदू हो, चाहे वो मुसलमान हो, पंजाबी हो, सिंधी हो. When we used to have these conventions, आपको मालूम है, we had, and again I've recorded it in this book, we had a convention in Calcutta. जब there were 100 Pakistanis and 100 Indians. एक Great Eastern Hotel था कैलकटा में, और वो अब बहुत, because वो होटल इतना decrepit हो चुका था, तो इसलिए हमें सस्ते में मिल गया होटल, because we couldn't afford it. So every Pakistani and Indian stayed there. 200 of them marched on the streets of Esplanade of Calcutta, and lots of Bengalis joined up. इस वक्त तो आरजी कार की बात हो रही है ना. Calcutta is in the news for the most horrible atrocity ever. But at that time, the whole group, entire Calcutta crowd moved in front of the New Market, and Jyoti Basu called them. And Hashim Abdul Halim, who was the Speaker of the West Bengal Assembly for almost 20 years, he had a reception for them. So that Bon Homi, there was another convention in Calcutta, again 100 Pakistanis and 100 Indians, and all the Karnataka joined at that time. So that spirit is there, and I feel, that feeling is there, and especially the two Punjabs. So I was telling you how I'm a Haryanvi by that descent, because my family was all shunted off to Pakistan, and then I'm also a Kashmiri, and there is the desolate paradise. मेरा इसमें एक chapter है that I was born in Kashmir. तो मैं कश्मीरी भी हूँ और मैं हरियाणवी भी हूँ. तो मेरी सारी जिंदगी का निचोड़ जो है वो मैंने जो जैसी टूटी फूटी जबान मुझे आती है मैंने आप लोगों के सामने रख दिया है.
बहुत खूब, बहुत खूब. Any question from Syeda ji?
मैम हिंदी में बोल लूँ मैं?
हिंदी में बोलिए तो ज़्यादा समझ में आएगी।
नहीं मुझे इंग्लिश में भी बोल सकता हूँ, बट वो फिर वो रूह नहीं आएगी जो आपने बातें कही है ना, उसका वो नहीं आएगा रस।
फरमाइए
तो
फरमाइए।
हाँ जी मैं ये कह रहा था कि जो आपने बातें कही इतनी ज़्यादा अच्छी हैं, ये काश ये हो जाए, कई चीज़ें ऐसे रीम्स में हो जाएं, और कितनी ज़्यादा है, मेरा भी दिल करता है, मैं फौजी हूँ रिटायर्ड, कि रिलेशन अच्छे हो जाएं, एंड देन वी आर सेम पीपल, यू नो, I've gone abroad in UN forces and we could speak the same language, but वो किसी तरीके से वो पैगाम नहीं जा पा रहा मैम। आप जैसे शायद शख्सियत के थ्रू चला जाए। समस्या पाकिस्तान की शायद वो है कि वहाँ डेमोक्रेसी नहीं है। आई एम नॉट अ पॉलिटिकल एनालिस्ट, आई एम नॉट अ पॉलिटिकल साइंटिस्ट, बट वो एक रास्ते में आ रखा है, एक वो जो अविश्वास हो गया है। विश्वास कई बार कदम बढ़े फिर कुछ और हो गया, कैसे करें? मतलब आपका तो परिवार भी वहाँ पे है, 97% पानीपत से चले गए, मैं भी आपके पास के ही रहने वाला हूँ, यू मस्ट हैव फाउंड आउट फ्रॉम माई टंग। सो कैसे मैं रोहतक का हूँ, रोहतक का जी मैम। अच्छा, जी मैम, बिल्कुल पानीपत के बगल का। तो मैं ये कह रहा हूँ कि कैसे पहुँचा जाए, कुछ है कोई तरीका जो एक आवाम में पहुँच जाए वहाँ पे? मैं ये नहीं कह रहा कि वहाँ पे विद्रोह करके उनको खड़ा कर दिया जाए पूरे पाकिस्तान के आवाम को, लेकिन एक कहीं ना कहीं पे हाईजैक हो रखा है वहाँ पे भी, जो एक आम हिंदुस्तानी में एक वो जो डिस्ट्रस्ट हो गया है, और वो मुसलमानों में भी डिस्ट्रस्ट है जो हैं। देयर आर मुस्लिम सोल्जर्स आल्सो हु फॉट पाकिस्तान, आई मीन दैट्स बिसाइड्स। वो कैसे करा जाए? कितनी कोशिशें हुई हैं और फिर हो गया, फिर फेल हो गया। शायद आप जैसे हैं, कुछ ही बचे हैं लोग, बहुत खुशवंत सिंह जी थे, वो तो चले गए, वो करते थे इन चीज़ें, वो पाकिस्तान भी बहुत जाते थे, वीज़ा भी नहीं मिल पा रहा आपको आपके आई मीन नियर वंस के फ्यूनरल के लिए। कोई तरीका है, कोई है ऐसा कोई जुगाड़ या कोई आई मीन आम उस तक पहुंचा जाए? मैं था बॉर्डर पे, हम बातें करते थे दोनों आसपास में, ठीक है, उधर ऊपर जाते थे, और मेरे को किसी ने बोला कि सियाचिन ग्लेशियर पे रोके, वो पाकिस्तानी है, उसके लिए कुछ जहर डाल दो। क्यों? हम दोस्त भी बन गए, बट एक वो नहीं हो पा रहा है कनेक्ट। कहाँ पे हो वो पुरानी चीजें ले आई जाएं यहाँ पे, हम अदरवाइज हम ड्राइंग रूम में बैठ के सारी डिस्कस करते रहेंगे और फिर वॉर हो जाएंगे। थैंक यू।
दैट्स अ वेरी वेरी नाइस क्वेश्चन, बहुत शुक्रिया, बहुत बहुत। मैं आपके इतने प्यारे सवाल का क्या जवाब दूं, मगर मैं अली सरदार जाफरी की 4 लाइनों में आपका जवाब दे सकती हूँ, एंड देन वी कैन गो ऑन टू एनी अदर क्वेश्चंस। जाफरी साहब कहते हैं, तुम आओ गुलशने लाहौर से चमन बरदोश। तुम आओ चमन बरदोश मतलब अपने कंधे पे पूरा बाग उठा के आओ, दोष कहते हैं कंधे को। तुम आओ गुलशने लाहौर से चमन बरदोश, हम आए सुबह बनारस की रोशनी लेकर। तुम आओ गुलशने लाहौर से चमन बरदोश, हम आए सुबह बनारस की रोशनी लेकर, हिमालय की हवाओं की ताजगी लेकर। फिर उसके बाद ये पूछें कि कौन दुश्मन है, फिर उसके बाद ये पूछें कि कौन दुश्मन है। और फैज साहब क्या कहते हैं? फैज साहब ये कहते हैं, एंड दैट्स वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, एट द टाइम ऑफ जब आज़ादी मिली एंड इंडिया एंड पाकिस्तान, फिर वो 2 नेशन एंड ऑल दैट, वो कहते हैं ये दाग दाग उजाला, ये उजाला जो है इसमें धब्बे लगे हुए हैं, ये दाग दाग उजाला, ये शब गुजीदा शहर, ये सुबह जो हुई है उसमें धब्बे लगे हुए हैं। ये दाग दाग उजाला, ये शब गुजीदा शहर, ये वो शहर तो नहीं जिसकी आरजू लेकर चले थे यार कि मिल जाएगी कहीं ना कहीं। हम तो चले थे ना कि शहर आ गई, आजाद हो गए मुल्क, और फिर मुल्क बट गए, दोनों मुल्क बट गए। ये दाग दाग उजाला, ये शब गुजीदा शहर, ये वो शहर तो नहीं जिसकी आरजू लेकर चले थे यार कि मिल जाएगी कहीं ना कहीं। अभी गरानिए शब में कमी नहीं आई। The night is still dark. It has not, the dawn has not broken. अभी गरानिए शब में कमी नहीं आई, चले चलो कि वो मंजिल अभी नहीं आई। तो आपके सवाल का ये जवाब है कि वो मंजिल अभी नहीं आई है, और आप जैसे लोगों को वो मंजिल, उस मंजिल को लाना है, उस मंजिल को हमारी मंजिल मकसूद बना देना है। इट्स आवर एम एंड आवर ऑब्जेक्टिव। वो शहर तो फूटेगी, बट दिस नेक्स्ट जनरेशन शुड नॉट सफर like we have suffered for the last 10 years, and then we have also it's been very patchy. It's certainly not been a smooth sailing. That's my very humble answer to your question. So sweet of you. Thank you.
That was such a beautiful ending, such a beautiful ending. I'm sure you'll agree with me. We couldn't have had a more eloquent speaker, madam. We couldn't have had a more eloquent speaker than you to end this. No, please, because if I give one, I'll have to give another. Please, we have a performer waiting. He was supposed to start at 7 o'clock. Can you do it outside? Please, if you don't mind, I'm the villain of this story.